Today I grabbed that piece of cracked Damascus pattern welded steel, and I ground off the scale and dropped it in the ferric chloride for an etch just to see what happened. I'm not going to be able to salvage the steel itself, just curious about how it turned out. I'm going to jump into some more Damascus, but I'm going to try it with some cable steel. I have an idea. I want to forge this down into a couple of billets, forge them together. Between that, sandwich some carbon steel for the cutting edge of a knife. Contemplating trying another Damascus billet. I'm just going to jump into it. So I've cut off, it's roughly 23 centimeters long. I don't know how much I need. What I'll do now is I'll quickly weld this together so that as I'm hammering on it doesn't all fall apart. Then I'll cut a length of rebar to use as a handle, weld that onto the end of this. Significantly harder than I was expecting. I forgot to twist the thing at the start. I think that might be the problem. Got a good weld through here. That was not successful. So forget cable Damascus. I don't know what I'm doing enough. I'm pretty sure all of this section worked fine, but I forgot the twist. When you get it hot, you have to twist it really tight before you start whaling on it, and I forgot to do that. So for now, forget cable Damascus. I'm going to go back to trying regular Damascus. I'm going to go 5 layers deep, 1084, 1520, 1084, 1520, 1084. I'm just thinking if I want to have, because the 15 and 20 shows up bright, the 1084 shows up dark. I only have 2 layers of 15 and 20 here to 3 1084. I'm wondering if I want to go 3 layers of 15 and 20 to 2 layers of 1084. So 15 and 20, 1084, 15 and 20, 1084, 15 and 20. There we have it, all cleaned up. Same again, 15 and 20 is in red, 1084 has black marks. So now I'll stitch the ends, stick on a handle, and then we'll get to forge welding. Probably not my best idea.
Alright, so it's a couple of days since got the billet back in the forge, stretching it out, going to try and make it square, I guess, long and square. That way I can double up, maybe turn one on its side, have two different variations. I don't know, we'll see. But I think I'm getting the hang of drawing out the steel. I gotta show you something. So that broken bit of Damascus that I was just gonna throw away, the one that I sheared off as I was hammering it, as I was brushing it, just to see how it turned out, I ended up grinding it, etching it, making myself a tiny little cleaver. Unfortunately, I don't have anything longer to put a handle on. Doesn't seem to want to focus. I'll use another camera angle later, but you can see where the cracks are through there, which isn't ideal, but the Damascus worked alright for as few layers as it has.
While the Damascus billet was cooling off and whatnot, I took that piece of my original billet that snapped and thought I'd see how it turns out. Ta-da! Mini cleaver. I don't think my acid is strong enough. It doesn't really etch correctly, but just here, you can see all the cracks that showed up before, all through here. So this is not something that you would present as a professionally finished product. There it is. Mini meat cleaver. Okay, so I'm refilming this part. I wasn't happy with the finish on it. I dropped it in some acid again, and you can see that the pattern is far more defined now. In principle, my Damascus worked on my first/second attempt, other than the fact that it broke. But the pattern welding itself was good. It is pretty sharp, I think. Not really. Oh boy. Nah. But yeah, I won't complain with that. So I think I have a rough idea of how to do it. It's just a matter of practice makes perfect now. So we'll just continue on.
So I just keep doing this basically.
I guess that brings us to the end of another day. I've run out of gas, but it's not all bad. I actually had a bit of success today. Pretty happy with how this thing's turning out. It's somewhat square, as I wanted. Started off this size. This is what we're looking like now. It's looking pretty good. I don't see any cracks. I do see that my welded handle is coming off. I'm definitely learning some technique for moving the steel around, which makes me happy. What I'm not too keen on is that there's that ridge down the center is from when I'm hammering this way along here. The top and bottom get pushed out, the center bends in a little bit. I don't really care, it's just one of those things, I guess. Smooth off one side, really nice and flat, chop it down the middle, bring that over, forge weld them. I'll have 10 layers then. 10's not enough. I'm gonna then try to get it like this. I don't know how successful it's going to be. I'll give it my best shot. I must have eaten something funny last night. I've got gas. What I need to do now is cut it in half, restack it, weld it together, fix this weld down here, and then forge weld it together. Chop, restack. What I'm thinking about doing is, if I've got my dimensions close enough, I might rotate 190 degrees on top. That way we'll have some layers going this way, some layers going that way. Squash it down, do a few more flips, see how we go. I've re-welded the handle. I've changed the orientation of these. I do have a little bit of a difference in size. So I'm just going to forge the bottom one down to the right dimensions, and then we'll forge weld the two pieces together. I reckon that this is what I've ended up with. 5 layers going this way, then when I rotated 90 degrees, ended up with 5 layers going that way. I don't know if this is going to work out. I have no idea how this is going to go. I've thought about what I'm going to do next. Split it down here, and then stack these layers against themselves. And what you'll end up with is something that looks like that. Then I'm going to just squash it flat, and then I think I'm just going to leave it like that. I don't know how this is going to turn out. And hopefully it'll end up being 10 layers in the middle. I'm not counting here. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's too many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. And I'll end up with something like that. Something like that. I don't know how that's going to work. I really don't, because by the time I grind bevels off, I'm going to lose these bottom ones anyway. Oh boy, that might not work. I'm going to have to rethink this. Alright, so I think I've messed up here. The way this is going to work isn't going to come out as ideal as I wanted, I don't think. If I wanted this to work well, I'd have to cut it into sections, rotate them sideways, and stitch them together so that we'd end up with a bunch of squares, side by side, something like this. But without the use of power hammers and stuff, I have no faith in my ability to be able to produce this. So I may have messed up here, because while I was thinking about this, I've already restacked it like an idiot. I haven't forge welded it, but I'm losing more and more material as I go. So what I'm thinking about doing is getting a drill and sort of putting a few, not all the way through, not holes all the way through, but just like putting, I don't really know how to word it, but putting little dents in it. I'll countersink them so that they stay open when I'm trying to forge it down, and they don't form any hot shuts, cold shuts, whatever they're called. And that will expose some of these inner layers within those circles, I think. Oh, wish me luck. I've got my billet back in the forge. I don't know if I can rectify the mistake that I made with the pattern. I'm going to try, but I'm not going to draw it out anymore. I'm going to flatten it, start heading towards a blade. It may only be a paring knife or something. I'm losing so much material. I didn't realize I'm not going to have as big a billet at the end of this as I was expecting. Oh well. Alrighty, that'll be that for today. I'm just going to let that cool now. I've lost so much material. I don't know how it's going to turn out. in the end. I am learning a few techniques and whatnot, and it's becoming easier every day to do the forge weld and to move material. Getting it longer is no problem. Getting some width, I'm struggling. I don't know if that's just because I don't have the right tools, rounding hammer, or I've lost so much material. This blade's going to be tiny because I'm going to make a knife out of it if I can. As I was showing you before with these pictures, I didn't think the pattern through. I should have just left it as straight layers instead of doing the 90-degree flip. Kinda may have messed myself up there. So as it sits now, I'm thinking about chopping my billet in half one more time. What would that mean? I don't know anymore. I lost track of what I'm doing. Can you tell? I think I'm going to flip it. Tomorrow, I'm going to come back. I'm going to cut the thing in half, do another forge weld, and then draw it out to this size again, or the size it is now, which is a bit longer than this. And that would allow me to make the material thicker and then draw it out to the length that I want. Maybe. Anyway, on that note, I got to work again tonight. A colleague called in sick, so now I'm doing an 8th shift straight, which is radical. Sorry, it's been a few days since I recorded last. I ran into a bit of an issue with my angle grinder. It's just a cheapy Ryobi. I think it cost me $60 or something years ago. It's only a 100mm disc. Problem is, I don't know if it's gonna work. On and nothing unless I pull on the cord. So that's not right. I've done something that's probably, I yank on it and I yank on it and I often pull the cord out of the point with the grinder, just which isn't good for it. I think I've disconnected some of the contacts or something, but it's not right. So I need to do something about that. There's only one, I can pull this apart, but there's only one solution that I can think of for this. Sorry to interrupt here, but this next scene was meant to be this clever little, hey, here's the only way you can solve a problem like this, and then I was gonna dump it in a fire, and you know, that's the only way of fixing a problem like that. Burn it, buy a new one. So I took it on a camping trip with me. But as you can expect, copious amounts of alcohol were consumed, and this was the only salvageable footage. Oh, surprisingly, it's hot. Oh, who would have thought? Alrighty, so now that that's done, I'm down to Bunnings. Bought myself an AEG, $99 for a 125mm, 1100 watt angle grinder. I'm concerned with how much material I'm losing or have lost through scale and grinding and whatnot, because this is what my pieces started off like. You know, it's only ever so slightly smaller that way, and it's only slightly longer that way, and the thickness is probably only about twice the size. I've lost a lot of material. I don't know how many layers are left in here. I'm concerned that I'm just not going to have enough by the end of this project. So what I'm going to try to do is the very first billet that I made, or attempted to make, that I thought was too thick, turns out I just wasn't getting it hot enough because I'm a noob, because I really don't know what I'm doing. This is all guesswork still for me. I think I'm going to give that piece another go, get some more substance from that, join this to the other billet. Yeah, it's a bit deformed, but whatever. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers in here, I think it is. 6 or 7 layers. But this hasn't had any folds or anything. This is only just welded together. Barely as well, I think. So I'm going to try and forge this out into something, somehow join this to this. Don't really know. So I'm just going to move on to this. Let's just get this part done, and we'll come back to this later. So I'm pretty happy with how this has come out. I'm slightly concerned about inclusions where my twists sort of overlapped a little bit. Don't really know how that's going to pan out. All in all, considering when I first started with this piece, I thought this was going to be an impossible task. It's come out alright. But now I have to think about what I'm going to do with that piece and what I'm going to do with this piece. Initially, at the start of today, I was going to cut this in half again, fold it, then do some drill stuff. But by the time I grind this down, if I drill more out of it, then hammer it flat, this thing's going to be so thin. I don't know. I'll get back to you. I've decided that I'm going to go ahead, mark a few little random spots, put some drill bits into it, really ever so lightly, just to take a couple of layers off that I can then, once I forge it flat, different layers are going to show through. As you can see, I've got a few dents, which I'm going to heat up this piece again, forge it flat. So I should have theoretically exposed a bunch of layers here. Once I forge it all flat, they'll come to the surface. So hopefully, I'll have little circles of pattern. I'm going to flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. That's as far as I'm willing to go with this piece. You can sort of see the dents still, but they're significantly less than what they were. Hopefully I can grind them out and it won't show up too badly. I think that's 2 billets completed for now. So with this twisted billet, I'm going to grind off all this scale. I'm going to grind out some spots that I'm a little bit concerned, like this just here. I'm worried about that being an inclusion. Maybe this whole line here. This one here. Definitely grind that out. Then I'm going to cut this in half, and stack it this way so it'll be too high. Then forge weld that down. Might do that a couple of times. There it is, forged a little further. I ground out my lines to my satisfaction, then just hammered it down reasonably flat. Yeah, not the best, but whatever. Once it cools, I'll cut the scale off, grind the scale off, and then do a chop, flip, and then forge weld it together again. So, you can see down the center, there's a definite line. That was a bit silly. Where my 2 rolls of twisted Damascus are formed together, welded together. I'm hoping that that's just a external mark and I've got a successful weld. I'm going to have to lop off the end because that's where my stick weld is, which means it's contaminated at the end. Hopefully I can somehow figure out how to use this, somehow bring these 2 together. Don't know. I'll figure it out. I think I've decided what I'm going to do. For now, I'm just going to chuck this on here, trace around it. These 2 corners are where I welded, so that will mean that I get to lop that off, get rid of the welded sections. Then I'm just going to, rather than go into the intricacies of this, I'm going to just create a full tang. Well, continue that on till the back. Then I'm going to figure out how to insert that piece into this, which will be my handle. So I think it's going to mean I have to cut this end off to get rid of my weld here. Then I'm thinking what I'll do is drop everything. Shortly after dropping everything, what I'm going to do is maybe cut a slot in here where my blade will be able to sink in all the way back, which I'll epoxy, put some holes through however far in my tang goes, chuck some pins in there and maybe peen them. I'm not really sure. I think that's the best course of action for now, because if I were to, firstly I couldn't, but if I was just to cut this entirely in half right down the length of it, I'd lose so much material, which I'm not really keen on doing. So I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. So there it is, got it marked out. I guess now all that's left is to cut it out and grind it down. So I've roughed out what I want to do here. I've got a bit of work ahead of me. I've center punched the width of the tang. Yeah, I'm terrified I'm going to ruin this now. Wish me luck.
a blunt drill bit now. Oh, what am I gonna do? So it's been about an hour. I've managed to successfully drill a 2.5mm deep hole. That's all I can do. I'm in a little bit of trouble here. I think I'm gonna have to turn this into a blade, a full tang blade, and just make a wooden handle for this. I really wanted to see a Damascus on Damascus blade though. A Damascus handle on a Damascus blade. I've made the decision. I'll make a wooden handle for this. The knife won't be all that durable because that's not a big enough tang. There's a lot of leverage inside the wooden handle for that to twist out, whatever. But whatever. I don't have very square edges, so I'm going to go along and tidy everything up on the outside here. And then I'm going to get into bevels. I've never ground a blade before, you'll be able to tell. With this wonky line up here. This side doesn't have that. I'm worried though, I've brought this cutting edge way down way thinner than I had intended, which might be problematic for the heat treat. This is going to drive me nuts. I'm pretty happy with that.
Forge is lit, ready for treat treat. I'm worried about how thin my edge is, that it's going to warp in the heat. I don't really know what to do. Hopefully I didn't just mess it up too bad. So I'll get it up to critical, wait for it to be non-magnetic, dump it in some canola oil I've got sitting here. And then after that you temper it. Don't really know the correct temperature. I'm going to run 200, 220 degrees for maybe 2 hours. And that just sort of helps the structure of it settle and relieve some of the tension that comes from heat treat. Pretty sure that was unsuccessful.
Oh boy, still pretty hot. Who would have thought? Still has a pretty straight edge on it, which is pretty cool. If it's been successfully hardened, a file should just skate across. But I'm pretty sure, yeah, it's filing away. So that was not a successful heat treat. I don't know, does that mean, am I able just to throw it straight back in? I don't know, I'm gonna.
I'm not going to test for magnetism, if it's still magnetic.
I think we might have done it. I'm not sure. I think it was alright. It's certainly not biting like a file normally does. So I'm going to call it good enough. Now it's time for the fun part. No, it isn't. It's time for temper. I'm sick of sanding now. I wish my belt sander got to a higher grit than 120. But I've been doing this for a little while now and I'm not making much more ground, so I'm just going to leave it. So it's not perfectly smooth or anything, but I think for now this is good enough. Yeah, I guess it's time to put it in the ferric chloride. Not sure about this. We'll see. Drop it in there. I'll give it an hour or two, I think. I'm not really sure how long it's meant to go in there for. Moment of truth, I guess. Take it out of the acid, quick rinse in some water, and then I'm going to drop it into a extremely bicarb heavy solution. Interesting. Very interesting. I had no idea how this was going to turn out. Not great, but that's all right. And then into the bicarb, which is apparently supposed to neutralize the acid. Now, I was hoping to see more layers than that, but as I said, I lost track of the orientation of all my pieces and whatnot. I did that stupid flip, the rotation 90 degrees, so in the end I ended up having absolutely no idea how this was going to turn out. I can't say that I'm disappointed or frustrated or anything. I didn't expect it to really work. It's my first attempt. Yeah, so that's absolutely nothing like what I thought it was going to be. I thought there'd be some layers there, but it's not to be. Now I guess I need to... It still needs its cutting edge because it's blunt at the moment. Need to polish up the bright stuff. Yeah. I have my secondary bevel, which is the cutting edge, on there now. It's sharp, but it's not as sharp as I'd like. It'll do as a box opener. Got to make a handle. I don't really know what to use. I don't want to put anything too fancy on it. I have these slats that came out of an old set of bifold doors. I have no idea what it is. It's fairly lightweight. That's a good thing or not. I'm just going to get into it. So I've just given it a nice flat top edge, flat front, and flattened off the bottom. That way I can line this up nice, recess it in a bit. I think I'll try to bring it parallel to the top. So I've done a abysmal job here, but I'm gonna just call it good enough. So I've recessed a fairly hefty chunk here. I brought it down from the top a bit. That way there's some pressure above the knife to stop it from that way. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. I've brought it down nearly flush with the wood so that I don't have to do this side. I'm just going to clamp the two together, and then rather than having a weak spot here where the wood joins for this to be able to lift, it's going to be pushed. It's going to have wood above it, so the line will be a bit offset, but I don't really care. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of a bevel before I set the knife in it, get this the way I want it. Probably do the same on this side, and then epoxy them together. I don't think I'm going to pin this because it's just going to be decorative. I'm not really going to use it. I'm not going to bother putting pins through it. I'll do that with the next knife, which will have a full tang. So for now I'm just going to chop this in half, bevel the edges, and see how we go. And this is where I could ruin the whole bloody thing. I hope not. I have no idea how much of this stuff to use, so I'm going to intentionally use too much. I think in an ideal world we wouldn't get any on the blade, but I'm panicking. Don't know if you can see it. The blade is slightly offset to this side because of the way that I've recessed it into this one and not into this one at all. Hopefully I can symmetricalize, make it even when I work the handle to shape. We'll see. And there we have it. My first attempt at a knife. It has its flaws. It's not quite symmetrical here. The knife is offset. These grooves are not really even, but they do suit my hand fairly well. The tang isn't far enough in, so the leverage on here could eventually break the knife. Vasquez didn't come out how I thought it was going to, but it's not bad. I couldn't quite get this bevel to come all the way to the back without hitting this. I don't know how to deal with that, but for my first attempt, I'm pretty stoked with this. I'm pretty damn happy with that. Don't really know what to say here. I'm just happy. I think that this is proof that, you know, if you want to achieve something, you just have to try. You can't get success without putting the work in. So starting all these projects and the forging and whatever has resulted in me making my first knife. I'm glad that I started this whole process. That's not where it ends. You're stuck watching me learn some more of this. But for now, I guess that's it for this video. I'm going to end it on a good note. It's been a long ride to get to this point, but that's what it's about. It's about the journey. It's about the hard work, and boy, was it hard work. I never thought this would be easy, but I've got a newfound respect for knife makers. This is hard. Anyway, I don't really have much else to add here, so